Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is June 11, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure today to be here with Jack Lawrence Mayer. Jack, where in the heck you calling in from?
I'm calling in from downtown Los Angeles, Pico Union.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being. Ooh, I would say, whether or not it's true, a sense of being free.
Oh, I love that. Freedom's a huge theme in this. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Oh, information. I'm a reader. I'm a voracious reader. So
Yeah.
I would say the written word in that sense.
Did you become a reader? One, because your parents told you to read. Two, they did it as an example or on your own?
They certainly did it as an example. I was a fairly anxious kid, though, so I think being in a room with my books was a peaceful place, was a safe place, was a place where I didn't feel anxiety.
Yeah, beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, wow. I think I have a little bit of a different answer to that than I would have 2 years ago, because I found when the pandemic first hit, I had this sudden voracious appetite to learn about things I'd never learned before and to archive and catalog. And so I started diving into subjects of human history that I'd never learned about, just so I could have a whole new room full of stories and facts and inspiration and where we came from. And I became kind of a cataloger. And so I think that it, to some degree, is a fighting off of a sense of helplessness and a fighting off of a sense of being out of control, that we gather information as, whether it's practical or just experiential, a way to feel as though we are sitting atop of our own lives to some degree, especially in a chaotic world.
Really good choice of words, though. Fighting off a sense of helplessness. Yeah. So, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's, my first instinct is to say innate, but we had to invent information to some degree, as far as the written information or as far as cataloged information. That in and of itself feels somewhat unnatural. So I do think we have an innate desire to learn and to hoard, whether that is physical objects or ideas.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
Do.
Yeah. See, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Mm.
So many people now are answering that with do it, actually experience it, like not in another form. Like basically, you sort of brought this up already. We basically invented three forms of communication: spoken word, printed word, and electronic word.
Mm.
And spoken word including gesture.
Yeah.
So, this is doing is something that is not necessarily involved in those three forms. You can do without spoken word, printed word, and electronic word. That's called direct experience, basically.
Yes. Yeah. First-hand primary experiences.
Yes, without doing it. But can humans think without language?
Oh, so an author who's inspired me quite a bit on this has been Walker Percy, and his book on language and on the unique quality the queer quality, as he calls it, the queerness of man, and how the queerness of man is expressed through the invention of language. I think that language was a necessary tool. It was going to be invented one way or another to manifest the fact that our mind knows it exists.
Yeah.
And I can't, the reason I hesitate to answer is because I think that the classic answer is say that distinguishes us from pigs or dolphins, but I don't know if that's true.
You don't,
And so I don't want to make us privileged, but as a human, I can say that I think that the mind knowing it exists is why language had to exist.
yeah, that's good, because that's anthropomorphizing. You know, we think, oh, dolphins can communicate. Well, why do you talk dolphin language? How do you know what words apply to their, this otherness?
Yeah.
We call it language. They might call it like, go get me some food and feed it to me.
Yeah. And they might be more right than we are about what we're doing.
Right. And then it's all about inventing the word right. What's right?
Yeah.
Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
On an individual level, I think I have always had this sense of almost imagining a moat, or there's a castle, there's a moat, there's walls, and there's multiple points of weakness. Maybe one on the north side, one on the south, one on the east, one on the southwest corner. And each one of those points of entry or weakness is a different rhetorical tact. And so my first instinct as a communicator is to reset my tact and look at another way, another lens through which to look at the problem, another metaphor, whatever it may be. But to simply to say that there's a moment at which somebody clicks in with you, and it's when you finally start kind of patterning your thought process on something intuitive to them already. And at that moment, I think communication becomes more possible, at least on a one-on-one level.
Yeah.
It typically takes one person to be, I don't want to say calculating, but it takes one person to be aware of that dynamic and be willing to kind of change their communication style.
Good use of words, Jack. I think when you said reset tax, TACTS.
Yes.
Tax. Yeah. It's almost like hit reboot or refresh.
Yes. Give me another, as a writer, one thing I talk about with my wife all the time is, can I just rewrite that? Can that just not have happened? What I said, it wasn't the right way of saying it. And I would love a chance to just cross it out, try again without the emotional baggage of having fucked up the first time. I'm sorry for the, yeah.
No, that's really important. I say, oh, I misspoke. You sort of backpedal. You go, oh, I misspoke. Well, that's but to recognize it and say, can I do a rewrite? that is good. Your observations of, well, no, I want to tell you this one. I says, what do you do when language breaks down? And the guy goes, group hug. I love that one. So your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think that we are feeling beings who have this magical ability to translate that into thinking, language, and structure, which is essentially a lie. And it leads to deep miscommunications where we think because we have a rational, logical series of language events leading us to a justification, that it's not essentially an emotional reality that we exist in, and an emotional stance that we're defending. So I would say we are feeling beings first.
Yeah. Two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
I think so. I think thinking is a function of the soul. I think that we then have to ask what the soul is, but whatever your answer is, thinking is a function of that entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2, can machines think?
No, I don't think that. And I feel kind of reactionary saying that, and I'm happy to unpack it, but I would say that a machine cannot think.
Yeah.
Uh, a machine can learn, and a machine can process, and a machine can create, but I don't think that a machine can think.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning, I would say so. I mean, I think that one leads to the other, but I'm a little skeptical of happiness. But meaning is something that I think I would die without. I think there's real despair where there's not meaning. Whereas happiness is a kind of, it's hard to differentiate happiness from lotus eating. It's hard to differentiate happiness from a certain type of distraction.
Yeah.
Whereas meaning is the obverse of despair. And that's how we stay alive.
Is I don't know this term, lotus eating. What is that?
Oh,
Is that a metaphor? What is that?
it's from the Odyssey, the land of the lotus eaters. He goes to this island, and they're all blissed out on basically opioids, eating these happy making plants that make you just want to lie in the sun all day. And you could, it's another type of hypnotism. You're stuck on the land of the lotus eaters, kind of like being in an opium den, except 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. No, who's the author of the Odyssey?
Homer.
Homer. Wow, that's good. I should know this. Okay. That was good. Yeah. Viktor Frankl's where I got the question, man's search for meaning. He says, meaning tends to last. Happiness doesn't necessarily last.
Yes. I was just talking to my father about this, and he was talking about the moment when he decided to have kids. And, he said, I thought this was so fascinating. He said that he was kind of talking in slightly old-fashioned terms, but he was saying that there's no man who wants to be seen as a dad by his kid and by his wife, that you're not cool anymore, you're not hip, you're not essential, you're not sexy, and that there's this terror of losing those things. But when you let go of that fear, you realize the deep meaning that comes with having your time obligated to somebody else. There's meaning in obligation and duty. And for years and years and years and decades of your life, having your time not be your own. And he was talking about the beautiful feeling he had in his mid-70s, having 6 kids and having gone through that experience and that meaning, as opposed to just the kind of baseline fear of ever being obligated. So I would tie meaning and obligation together as well to some degree.
Yeah. Well put. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I'm thinking back to being a younger human when that would have first been coming about. I think that, yeah, I would say that we are, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, but I think if you're talking about what's primary, what happens first, I do think that we detect a consciousness, we learn about it, we discover. That doesn't mean that we're not then given a new tool to then create it forward, but I think first is the discovery.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Ooh, speed of light.
The poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Can't. I mean, I love the quote. I'm just going to think through this one. That's a quotation that sticks with me. I'd never heard of the rejoinder. and this idea of exposing the tools. I would say I'm gonna ramble for a moment here, but I'm reminded of something Godard once said. Jean-Luc Godard once said, the French filmmaker, and he said that cinema failed as an art form when it failed to prevent the Holocaust.
Ooh.
And cinema failed a second time as an art form when it failed to prevent Sarajevo. And that he basically felt as though if showing people to each other was enough, there should be no genocide after we're able to show people to each other in such a way as cinema allows. And so I'm not sure there exists, I'm not sure there exists a tool that can overcome a certain type of human meanness, an object type of tool.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound like I don't want to sound like an Augustinian or something, but I would say humility is a place to start.
Yeah. An Augustinian means who? Saint no.
St. Augustine. St. Augustine. I don't want to be humping St. Augustine here. I think he has.
What is his main thing?
Oh, I mean, his main. I mean, okay, I'm going to be a little cheeky and say that his main thing is that children are monsters, and I think that's why the church went so wrong 1700 years ago when they decided children are monsters, which is. And you can see that in everything from Dickens through corporal punishment today. But I would say that Augustine's main thing was a kind of humility, that none of his tools, his intellect, his work, his ability to create, none of those made the world a better place. And simply a position of humility was where he could be the most creative and the least destructive.
Wow, you taught me a lot there. That's amazing. The tool of humility. It was almost like you were going to answer with the way no one's ever answers. Like, there is no new tool. I thought you were almost leaning there, but
direction, yeah.
But the Godard thing is super heavy, because that's what I think Joyce did with Finnegan's Wake, is he was saying a book could end warfare. And D.W. Griffith said of 100 years ago that in 2024, which is next year, cinema will end warfare. He literally said that. Now, this is like, what the heck? Then you go to Kenneth Anger, who just died, who says the day cinema was born was a black day for mankind. And it's true. I mean, as much as me and you love cinema, I mean, I hate it. I think it's as bad as Cars and TV. It's horrible. Really, what it does, it's like, just live life. Don't watch it on a fucking movie screen. But it is that Godard was saying cinema failed. Well, come on. I mean, he fucked around with cinema for what, 6 or 7 decades, because he probably believed it could do something.
You hope, otherwise it's nihilism, right? If you work on something.
Well, it's total nihilism. But Sidney Lumet said it best, actually. He said, cinema can't do shit, but it ain't going to keep me from trying.
That's a really well-spoken summary of my own approach to filmmaking, I would say.
Yeah, it can't do shit. But it's like, I asked this heavy poet once, can cinema actually do anything? He says, yeah. If James Dean wraps his cigarette pack in his t-shirt sleeve, kids will start doing that.
Yeah.
So it can definitely, I mean, every human invention does something, but it's like, can printed matter stop war? No, it propagates war. But we think if we write words on a pizza box, end the war, and walk around, that it might help. That's printed word. Anyways, we got into a lot of what we're going to get into now. This is what new toy do you suggest?
What new toy do I suggest? Ooh. that's not tied to the last question. That's just an open-ended question.
Well, it is in that I asked people what new tool do they suggest, and then someone said, "Well, I can tell you a toy I suggest." I says, "Well, why not follow it up and see what people say?"
Okay, uh I like that, and I'm going to advocate for a certain type of generous pleasure making, and I would say that depending on your proclivity, some kind of French tickler or vibrator,
Yeah,
some kind of toy for the bedroom to maybe have some more fun for yourself or somebody you like quite a bit.
yeah. No, that's great. I have had that answer, and when people say it, that's totally legit, and it's a smart answer, actually. Okay, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Oh, everything. When I go to bed at night, and I'm not proud of these worries, I think my going to bed worries are largely how I have failed, or I am embarrassed, or I've embarrassed myself, or I've been exposed as a fraud. Those are on the good nights. The bad nights, it's just that I'm going to die and be dead forever.
Geez, if you're a fraud and you're dead forever, you got it made, dude. You laid out the great scenario. What a playwright. There's your play right there.
My, I'm going to quote him one more time. My father once said when I was young that he didn't want to go to heaven. He didn't believe in heaven because the idea that you would die and then just have to be conscious forever.
Yeah.
Sitting around with these goddamn angels.
Yeah.
That was so boring that it horrified him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the opposite is the person gets to hell and the devil's standing there at the gates of hell. And the person looks in and he goes, "You have high Wi-Fi Zoom in hell?" He can see inside hell. And the devil goes, "That's all we got."
Oh my
That's
God.
like you got HBO, drug of your choice, and free Wi-Fi in heaven. Yeah, that's all we got.
The horror, right? The
Yeah.
absolute horror. Yeah.
So McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions.
Mm.
So, Jack, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Ignore is an interesting word because I don't think it's a choice. I think that there is a self-defense mechanism that cannot sustain. I think most folks, and I don't mean this condescendingly, most folks cannot sustain living with contradictions for very long. They
Yeah.
need their brain almost as a natural instinct needs to eliminate the contradiction, so they feel as though we feel as though there's some kind of consistency to our life, that we want things that make us happy and there's some goodness.
Yeah.
So I think that largely what's happening is an inability to name an unsolvable problem.
Yeah.
An unsolvable problem is too fucking big.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm sorry. Can I'll try to keep it down, but can I curse on this at all? I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you can say whatever you want. An inability to name unsolvable problems. Yeah. Yeah. Because I love Duchamp, Touche. He said, "There's no solutions because there's no problems."
Nothing is
That's the exact opposite. Humans' inability to name unsolvable problems. It's almost who the problems in the first place. Why is there problems?
right.
And why are they solvable or unsolvable? What's the deal?
There is one problem, and with this isn't political, but there is one problem which I feel fairly confident is a problem, which is that we have these minds which exist as metaphysical objects, and we exist in a kind of metaphysical reality in bodies that will die, and that is an impossible thing.
Well, then, no, you being a storyteller, perfect timing. Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my question to you, Jack, is can you forget to die?
Ooh, I used to think when I was a kid that there was something inside of each of us that finally accepted death. And that was actually the moment when we were capable of dying. And if we were able to resist that, if we could stubbornly avoid accepting death, then somehow we could avoid dying. But then nobody could do it because at the very last moment, as they get sicker and sicker, or whatever it may be, as the train comes closer and closer, they believe it. And the second they believe it, it becomes possible.
Boom. That's it.
That was my 13-year-old philosophy.
That's pretty strong. That's very beautiful in a lot of ways, just the wide picture. Because one friend told me, what happens to you after you die is whatever you believe happens to you.
Oh, that's a great parable. Wow.
That is heavy because no one ever is going to know what happens to you after you die. The white light and all that. Good. We hope. But what really, who knows? Anyways, do artists have moral obligation?
Only in one sense. I think that how do I put this? I'm going to speak for filmmaking for just a moment, and abstract it and take it away from the broad artist, which is that there is no medium that more is based on material reality than photography and film. It makes claims to show you material reality in a way that painting, prose do not. Dance. That the content itself is material reality. And I do think that to be extractive and to be manipulative and to be flattening of whatever you depict, that is a transgression of a moral obligation. But the moral obligation that you have is to not flatten and to not extract from whatever you're depicting.
Yeah.
Or writing about or thinking about, whatever it may be.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Ooh. I think I have an initial panic to new ideas, but if you gave me a few minutes, I am far more frightened of old ideas.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Ooh, it's one of those things that has now become recursive. As you get older, you remembering the memory. And so the one that I've always had is being on an airplane when I was 2 or 3 years old. It was my first time on an airplane. And I guess my mother had promised that I could drink a Coca-Cola if I behaved well on the plane flight. And I've got this memory of sitting there with the seat tray in front of me down and being given a Coca-Cola on an airplane at 3 years old.
Wow. That's, there's a great McLuhan joke. The kid says to the parent when they get in the airplane, when do we get smaller?
I love that perspective. Yeah. That's the narcissism of the child is really great.
Yeah. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Ooh, I would say that, I would say that memory is more of a blessing. I do think that knowledge might be a curse, but memory shifts in a way I think, to help us.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Oh, in my immediate family, it's, I would say I'd have to give that. I'm very marked by my family. I think that's already been clear. I would have to say my sister, Kathleen, 15 months younger than me, basically a twin from the time our interactions. She and I developed a language and a way of looking at the world, and an argumentative style and an analytical style, and a style of kind of mining deep and not letting something go until we've explored it from every possible angle. Nobody else understood it. Everyone else called it arguing. Everyone else got exhausted by it, but the two of us could just do it and do it and do it and do it. And I think that in a lot of ways, our brains developed, co-developed in a way that we could not extract one from the other.
Wow, that's heavy. What did her career end up being?
She's a lawyer. She works. She's a clerk. She is a judge. She clerks for a federal judge.
Yeah. And then outside your immediate family?
Outside of my immediate family, I would have to say I've had a lot of friends influence me over the years, of course, but I would say that I have a friend who goes by D, and she and I have known each other for 17 years. And almost every large decision I've made in my life, something that D has said has bounced through my head as I've made that choice.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's rare to find a friend who cares about you enough to just tell you what you need to hear. And I don't want to be cliched about it, but she is that type of person who speaks so frankly and directly, and sometimes in a way that bothers you in the moment, but that's real care.
Yeah. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No. My mother wanted us to go to church a little bit as kids, but it was largely so that we would make friends in the neighborhood. I'm from the South. That's just a very common thing. My father refused to go to church. He was raised Episcopalian and thought that religion was the meanest thing about man, and was very opposed to any kind of organized religion, but he felt kind of bad about it. And so he wanted us to have some sort of spiritual upbringing. And so he would give us books as we were growing up to read that maybe explored the spirit without exploring organized religion. And so, yeah, that's a pretty common for my age group. I think that's pretty common for our parents, but we were not a religious household. No, but he gave me a book, Harry Emerson Fosdick. He was a great I think he was Presbyterian, might have been Episcopalian preacher in New York in the mid 20th century. And he was the great liberal American Christian. And so we used to read a lot of him, and he wrote a lot about his book on on being a real person. And he wrote that the length of our infancy, the fact that for 3 years we're basically helpless, gives us this unique thing amongst creatures where we can form our opinions and impressions of the world, and we're not just consequences of the world. There's that line from Pascal, man is but a reed, but he's a thinking reed.
Yeah.
The universe can kill him, can crush him. We can asphyxiate on just a drop of water. But we know this about the universe, but the universe does not know this about us.
Wow.
That was a lot of our spiritual training, I guess, as kids, was that kind of writing.
Beautiful, Pascal. I love that. On being a real person. What a title for a book. And so, yeah, do you pray?
I have, yes. Yeah.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Ooh. I think if I ever know the answer to that question, I will have figured something out about myself that I haven't yet.
Yeah. Good answer, dude. Amazing. That's an amazing answer. 80% of people go, you did a good job.
I almost said it's okay. Just
it's okay. Yeah.
But I think that's not quite right now.
A lot of people also say, welcome home.
I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want to hear in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome home scares the crap out of me. I don't want to hear that.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Ooh. Evil uses people as a vehicle, but I do think we have moments of choice.
Yeah.
And I do think we can callous ourselves to be more prone to the evil choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hidden question really, Jack, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Setting up, it's like Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah.
Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
That's the approach that I typically take. It's funny because my wife and I argue about this a lot, where I tend to say we are giving too much power to enemies when we discuss them, analyze them, talk about them, discuss our feelings around them. But I've been accused of being a compartmentalizer. So I think that I would say that I agree with Watts that to name an enemy, to fixate them, that centers them in your story that creates a structure that you've mentally bought into, that gives them a power that they don't have to have. But I'm going to give you my wobbly anarchist answer here, which is that I think that human nature, the mean part of human nature, needs a rival, needs an enemy, needs competition. But that's all a distraction.
Yeah.
That's the game. It's just a game. And so I would say it's important to keep an enemies list, but to not take your enemies list very seriously, to have your tongue in your cheek as you write it, but to keep it. Know who they are.
You really named a lot there, because this is Paul Krasner asked his guru, some Eastern guru said, why is there evil in the world? And the guru said, to thicken the plot. Yeah. That's in the rival thing is Fellini saying, I need an enemy. No one ever, I rattle off so many quotes. There's a guy who recently just fixated on Fellini saying, I need an enemy. I says, well, that's nothing. Guess what Walt Whitman said? I no doubt deserve my enemies. That's like even deeper. Yeah, it's even deeper than Fellini, because like, well, I deserve my enemy.
Right. So I think that Fellini's genius is being able to articulate his own smallness. Like he's a genius because he knows how small we are.
Yeah.
That quote is right for him for that reason.
It's like articulate smallness. That's like Mike Kelly says that art is making your problems everyone else's problems.
Yep.
That is like, hello, Woody Allen. Jesus. I mean, hello, anybody who's been successful. It's like, hey, could I just,
No, it's a material universe in which everyone has your hangups and anxieties and falls. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the perfect lead into James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think, I'm trying to pick my words here because I could not disagree more with Joyce. And I think that, and he's Joyce, so I don't want to just kind of say the first thing that comes to head when I disagree with him profoundly. But I would say that my perspective on this is any artistic work of creation is the meeting of an individual brain, the world, and whether it is the lens through which that world is perceived or the structure through which that world is presented, I think that you're giving way too much credit to to material reality or real life, quote unquote. You're giving it far too much credit if you say you can derive the same things from it that you derive from a work of art. Because what a work of art is a conversation between humans about this thing called life that we are living through on some level. It is biased, it's built, it's remixed, it's fucked with. It is not in any way, shape, or form material reality. I know D.W. Griffith says that the art of cinema is the art of leaves going through the trees, but the leaves going through the trees on that screen, the choice of when to show it, how long to show it, the control over duration, the control over the composition, control over the context is profound.
Yeah.
That is the best that I can do with that.
No, that's well put. In fact, it leads to what first attracted you to do just what these people we just talked about, Faulkner and Joyce and filmmakers, to pursue playwriting. Because I mean, this is like, where's your tipping point to be a playwright and then to be a filmmaker? Where you know, what are you studying first, and then you go, hey, I want to do that?
I came to playwriting very young. The specific was for some reason, when I was in 5th grade, asked for a copy of Tom Stoppard's screenplay for Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah.
When I was 8, I saw Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. I think initially it was Kate Winslet's boobs that really attracted me as an 8-year-old boy, but it did make me see the movie a couple times. And so I got obsessed with Hamlet, and then I watched the Mel Gibson one, the Keanu Reeves one, Laurence Olivier, Ethan Hawke with Bill Murray. I just kind of like started immersing myself in these Hamlet adaptations. And around the same time, Shakespeare in Love comes out. Again, Gwyneth Paltrow is topless in that film, so perhaps a certain level of horniness actually led me to my hopefully more holy endeavors. And so I bought that screenplay, read it, and then for whatever reason, there's a part of my brain that said, I could adapt this into a play and direct this as a play in 5th grade. And so I think I just started, the first thing I ever did was I stole Tom Stoppard's work in what you would now call an adaptation, but I rewrote it as a stage play and put my name on it.
Yeah, that's great. But were your parents taking you to live theater before that, or were they having you watch movies on TV? Were you aware of what drama was because of what you were exposed to, or was it just normal kind of?
It was a little bit of, I mean, they saw that it started with the movies, but they saw that I had this interest. And, I grew up in Atlanta, and so they started taking me to the Shakespeare Tavern when I was pretty young, which was it's a cool theater. There aren't many out there that do it like this. They would do it with all the lights up. They would do it breaking the third wall. The idea was to do it as similar to Shakespeare's Day as possible. It was more populist. It was more body. You're eating, you're drinking.
Yeah.
So I had this very cool little Shakespeare theater we could go to that was very unpretentious.
Yeah.
Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, by the way, came to mind as something that I was taking in at that same time. So yeah. They would take me to theater. They'd take me to the Alliance. They'd take me to Shakespeare Tavern. But it was they saw that I had this obsession, and they encouraged it and cultivated it. Yeah. So I give them a ton of credit for that.
Yeah. So that was your tipping point for playwright. Then when did you kick into filmmaking?
So I had this moment when I was a senior in high school, and I realized that I was about to go off to college, and I no longer had access to a theater. I no longer had access to a drama club, all these free ways, you're kind of, you're a student, so you can make work for free. And the only permission structure has to do with how strict your school is, your drama club is, right? But then you go out into the world, and suddenly your ability to make theater relies on a lot of permission from a lot of sources of capital, right? Theaters have to say yes to you. Professional businesses have to say yes. You have to sell tickets. But you could get a digital camera. And I remember being 18. And so I was 18, just to give some context, in the year 2005, 2006. So this is when there's an explosion of digital cameras. This is when, I don't know if you're familiar with the Alan Cumming, Jennifer Jason Leigh film, The Anniversary Party, or the David Lynch film, Inland Empire. But people are making films on mini DV tapes.
Yeah.
The budget for the camera department, if you are willing to make a film in that kind of murky, muddy video, has gone from hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to nothing.
Yeah.
And so my first entry to filmmaking was a kind of, again, anarchist punk approach that I could make work without capital and without permission. But I was watching these video artists, from everybody from Lynch to Joe Swanberg, who was making Funny Ha Ha and Kissing on the Mouth and LOL, Hannah Takes the Stairs, early Duplass making The Puffy Chair. And so I was kind of coming up in this generation where people were making films for $5,000, and it was, and you could see them.
Yeah.
So I think I was always very drawn to autonomy. The story of how Linklater makes Slacker, the story of how Kevin Smith makes Clerks, those stories of autonomy really drew me.
Yeah. So very good. So screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker.
Yeah.
What role does intention play in your creative process when you're making a Jack Mayer film?
I'm trying to obfuscate intention. Absolutely. I think that the most interesting part of art to me is creating what I would call like a polyphonic work of art, where the voices of the characters come out so strongly that they are an active struggle with structure and narrative, that the story gets a little sloppy and can't stand still because the characters are stubborn and individualistic. And my real hope when folks walk out of something that I make is that there is earnest, authentic, and urgent disagreement about who was liked, who was rooted for, who was in the right, who was doing the right thing. And there's a line from Jean Renoir that I think sums up my entire artistic practice. And it's the terrible thing about the world is everybody has their reasons.
Yeah.
And if you can convey that, if you can convey a true polyphony, then maybe that is my intention, but it's a lot better than having a message or a moral or a takeaway or an angle, in my opinion.
Yeah. Really great Jean Renoir quote. I need that. Yeah. I would disagree with them saying terrible, though. I would just say the thing about the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be terrible.
Here's why I like terrible, because there is some irony in it, and that he's kind of saying, and because of that, you can't judge anybody. You can't just call anyone a villain. It's so much harder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer when you're making your film?
I've disagreed with a lot of artists about this. I do think about the viewer quite a bit. I don't necessarily think about what they want or about pleasing them, but I think about their phenomenological experience quite a bit. What it must feel like, especially because I work in film, what it must feel like in real time to be processing information, to be seeing this, to being surprised by this. But not necessarily, what they will buy tickets to, what they'll want, what will be successful.
Yeah.
But I do not. Yeah, good.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm not one of these folks who thinks that you just commune with your own inner spirit and then something comes out and the world can take it or leave it. I do think about storytelling. I do think about, I do see it as a two-way street.
Yeah. Well, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extend our teeth, shutter in a camera extends our eyelid.
Yeah.
Say even religion or philosophy might extend consciousness, something not tangible.
Yeah.
What is the film camera, whether it's video or film, extend for you? What humanness?
Ooh. I love that. I think that You know, I was definitely one of those kids. If you asked me what superpower I wanted, it would be invisibility.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, you know, I don't want this to come across just in the funny, creepy, voyeuristic way, but I do think that the film camera affords us the ability to see and not be seen in a way that
Yeah.
is thrilling and something we all want.
Yeah. No, it's funny because Jean Rouch, the French film documentarian theorist, says, when I put a camera between me and you, it's more true than if there's no camera.
Mm.
And it's like the phenomenon of this. If we were in a room together or we're at the Venice Boardwalk talking like we first met,
Yeah.
this is more true than when we were in front of each other live to me, because we're forced to be in a frame where it's just our head.
Yeah.
And that's what we're communicating. I mean, a little hand gesture and verbal exchange and eye contact.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is a phenomenon for me in my interviews. In fact, earlier on, I wanted to tell you, you really got what I'm after because you challenged one of the words. I forgot which one it was, but it was great because, see, it's really me and you versus the wording on my questions. That's what this is all about. It's like how you interpret the words, because my words don't always get what I'm trying to ask, but I'm trying to use these questions. So I like when people challenge or change the word. Well, let me change the verb there, you asked.
Yeah. I've been
And
accused of doing that a lot in my life. That is
well, that's you're aware of the medium, you're aware of the medium of what we're working in.
Yeah.
And that's like T.S. Eliot saying, when I talk to you, I got to use words.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You can just use hand gestures and in other ways, but we really, we're no, McLuhan's even better at saying word is the most addicting and universal drug.
Yes. And
That's
you know, I think one thing that I'm really fascinated by is that there are a lot of filmmakers who I really see myself as influenced by, who make
yeah,
very quiet films, very little dialogue, or very little
yeah,
talking happens. And yet I'm incapable of that, not because I think words are so vital or important or meaningful, but because I think that the compulsion to fill space with words is a fascinating, contradictory everything. It's analytical, but it's also avoidant. Words can be something that dig to the heart of the matter, or it can walk right around it. Words can be a safety blanket as much as they can be a sword. And
yeah,
so to recognize that this kind of compulsion to talk and talk and talk and think about language and what language means, that doesn't necessarily code somebody as being more or less honest, more or less analytical, more or less direct. It's just it is a neutral thing in and of itself that holds contradictions.
yeah. But just you anticipated the next question beautifully. You got ESP, but Jack, give me just an example by quiet or non-dialogue filmmakers. You mean like Tarkovsky and Malick, or who were you? Would you say you were referencing there, just off the top of your head? Was there anybody?
Yeah, I mean, Tarkovsky actually does come to mind, but the two that come to mind maybe most prominently would be I was thinking about Kelly Reichardt in particular.
Oh yeah,
I feel like I'm very influenced by Kelly Reichardt's films, and yet there's so little chatter. They can be silent for so long. And then I would say Pialat, the French filmmaker Pialat. I'm terrible with the French accent. I apologize, but
how do you spell the last name?
Pialat.
Yeah,
Bujalski is another one I would say. Absolutely.
yeah,
Andrew Bujalski. But yeah, I think I think that there is a tendency. Joanna Hogg. I think Joanna Hogg is a wonderfully influential filmmaker who uses silence very well. Whereas, I think Altman is really where my auditory or my sound crafting comes from Altman and from Lucretia Martel, and Robert Altman are the two that
Yeah.
use sound and words the way that I do, I think.
Yeah. It's good. So Peter Greenway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. And we talked a little when we met about experimental filmmakers. Are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? Like if me and you watch The Flicker by Tony Conrad, it's just black and white frames flickering for 15 minutes. We might have a story go through our head, but it's not storytelling per se.
Yeah.
So any comments on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think again, I'm going to do the thing where if by story you mean structure, or you mean narrative, or you mean a certain type of conformist theatrical tradition imposed upon film, that's one thing. And I would certainly say that I agree with Greenaway that film is far too rich to be dominated by pedantic narrative.
Yeah.
Whether you want to call Hollis Frampton, or whether you want to call even Peter Greenaway himself, narrative, whether you want to call video art narrative, whether you want to call Brackage narrative or story, I'd say that's kind of a personal decision based on what you define as story. But I would say that I am thrilled by the fact that they're not dominated by Western structured narrative.
Yeah. That's really well put, because Andrew Noren, who is an experimental filmmaker, said, if you put one frame next to another frame, that's storytelling. It doesn't matter if it's gobbledygook, abstract, or a face talking. It's still narrative because it's one frame after another. But your pedantic narrative is a great verb there. So I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago. I says, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in France, but it really flourished in the 80s to the point where Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. And I asked the question with a bias, can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I mean, so there's a lot of fascinating stuff there, which the first one is, are you actually taking in information faster just because the edit is going faster? The duration actually remains the same. But no, I would say that no, what we can do is we can kind of break our brain. I think that we all are prone to a certain type of ADHD. I think we're all prone to a certain type of mania. And it is very possible to break our brains just like we can break our stomachs with too much sugar.
Yeah. We break our brains. But the real hidden question, Jack, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
Oh, I find this fascinating as a man answering this question, because I do truly believe that there is a quality that most women I know have that I do not, which is the ability to multitask.
Yeah.
But as a man, I would say no, humans cannot multitask. We're lying to ourselves if we say we can, but I've been told that is a gendered opinion.
Wow. No, I think there's a lot packed in there. What was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch, your guess.
That thing you said earlier about, I don't know why I do something until I say it, or I don't know how I feel until I say it, until I write it, until I do it.
Yeah.
I would say that that's the motive of the cave artist, that they simply, they couldn't do anything else.
Yeah. Amazing. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, I almost said compromise just straight up, but I would say that compromise without conviction is massively dangerous. Conviction without compromise, depending on how much power one has, is pretty innocuous. So I would say that ultimately the two need one another. Otherwise, there's no there's no there. There's no reason for being or doing.
Yeah. It's my oldest question, and I actually got it from Christine McKenna, and these 9-year-old kid once said, "What's more important, conviction or compromise?" He says, "Those words are too big for me."
Now, I'm kind of interested in coercion or persuasion.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. It also, my other favorite was, guy goes, "What's more important, conviction or compromise?" Is depends on what you mean by important. Because that shifted, because when you said compromise, I was like, yeah, that's you that's the right answer. There's no right or wrong answers, Jack, but that one you got right, because 80 to 90% people say conviction.
Yeah. No.
And it's like, it's interesting when someone will actually say compromise off the bat, because it's hard. Of course, you can't say, it's sort of like feeling and thought. You can't separate them, but
No.
we think we can because we invented the words.
Yes.
So it's like this one. You've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Ooh. Luck, skill, and ambition. So I would say that ambition, and I'm not necessarily proud of this, I'd say that ambition is fundamental, because it is so easy to not put your stuff out there, to not create, to not even hone your craft out of a sense of humility or fear. So if without ambition, I don't know if you ever even get started.
Yeah.
But ambition is a dangerous, awful thing on its own. So I guess if I had to, I'm going to pedantically rank them and say that ambition is the most important, because otherwise there is no doing. And I would say that skill comes in second and luck comes in third. But if the luck doesn't happen, any three of them, the souffle doesn't get baked, right?
Right. Wow. Great metaphor. It's like luck is the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
And the question used to be, Jack, and I'll ask you that first, your observations of humans in general, is ambition based more on fear or more on joy?
I almost want us to have two words now, because I do think that there is a type of ambition that is fear driven, and that is destructive, acquisitional, mean, and the closest thing we have to a kind of an evil. And I think that if we let our ambition be fueled by fear, we lose our empathy, we become covetous, we become calloused, and we hurt people, and become more capable of hurting people. Whereas an ambition based on, what was it? Would you say hope or joy, or what was your
fear or joy?
Joy. Whereas an ambition based on joy, I'm not saying it's necessarily always going to make the world a better place, but an ambition based on joy is going to prevent you from feeling as though you have the right or the need to extract from others, to coerce others. So I think both exist. And we shouldn't act as though only one of them could be the source of your ambition.
Well, Jack, the history of the question is amazing, because it used to be, is ambition based more on fear or joy? 80% of people would say fear. And then that was it. So then I read William Friedkin a couple of years ago, and he says, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition. so you're in the right business, dude, because he's, he's a smart filmmaker. Whether you like his films or not is not. He's articulate about his art form. He can talk about it well, and especially knowing what Hollywood is,
That's lovely, because there are moments, and this is a little different, but there are moments when you have a choice to make. Somebody says you can make this film, but the crew is going to get paid less than they deserve. The conditions are going to be unsafe. There's going to be a creative compromise, but a bunch of people will see it and it's going to launch your career.
Yeah.
That's a place where maybe a sense of ambition then comes up against a certain type of value system.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
choose ambition in that moment, maybe you have lost something, sold yourself out. But that's only one manifestation of ambition.
Yeah, that's like my two favorite lines. Al Flipside said, "Don't sell out, sneak in."
Yeah.
Schrader said it best: "The role of the artist is to attempt to sell out, but fail."
Yeah. Oh,
That is
yeah.
that's really bullshitty because most people go, that's me, because they think I'm such a true artist. I tried to sell out, but my art is so authentic that I failed. So it must mean I'm a true artist. Like, give me a break. But it's great coming from him, you know.
There's one of my favorite songs is by Liz Fair, and it's
Yeah.
I think it's called "Shitloads of Money."
Yeah.
And she says it's nice to be liked, but it's better by far to be paid.
Yeah. That's good. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, I want to be literal and say that mine is in English. But I think that my inner dialogue is in fact a dialogue, in the sense that the best way I can answer that is to say that it is. I've never felt like I have like a strong sense of self, in the sense that there's a static thing inside of me that believes something for sure. And instead, I feel as though there is a cacophony of analytical countering points of views that kind of erupt out of my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like your inner dialogue is you and your sister Kathleen.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's still going, you know.
Well, I dedicated my first film to her. It's the first credit, and that's why.
Yeah. Two of my film heroes have this mantra. George Manupelli says, "Ignore yourself." Jonas Mekas says, "There is no self-expression." And as Cecil Taylor, jazz pianist, says, "I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me."
Mm-hmm.
Is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever cultures, technologies, and environments are dominant?
It's funny. I know the experience of feeling as though my art is just flowing through me. I know what that feels like. I know what it is to sit down, write something, read it later, and be like, I don't know where that came from. It came. That said, I think it is an absolute lie to say that art is not self-expression.
Yeah. Tabby, can art making be egoless?
Ooh, no.
Wow.
No, but that doesn't mean it has to be selfish.
Yeah.
The ego is the thing that if you pretend it doesn't exist, I think it does get stronger.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, Jack, because most people say no, like you did. And a woman's a couple of years ago said, great art is egoless. And then a couple months ago, a woman said, great art has to be egoless. So the thing that's touchy is how we've interpreted what the word ego means.
Yes. Yes.
You know, a guy a couple days ago said, "Do you mean the word bad? You mean ego as a bad thing?"
Yeah.
You know, so we it has been interpreted. Oh, you're egotistical.
Right.
That's, you know, so ego is such flow. You know, usually what I say when we get into this, I ask the question, was Freud right?
You know, all of this is I don't know how much you like the guy, but Wittgenstein, you know, the analytic philosopher.
Yeah.
This is all Wittgenstein, right? How do I answer the question, is great art egoless, if my definition of egoless is so different than yours? That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. I asked a big hotshot Hollywood movie director made a film about crazy people, and I said, in front of a big audience at USC, in front of film students, I said something about, can art making be egoless? And he goes, that's beyond my pay grade. And then eventually Later in the Q&A, he started addressing it.
Oh, wow.
But
Wow.
he knew, he says, dude, I'm going to get in trouble there.
I mean, yeah, it's you got to create it. You shouldn't be arrogant or solipsistic
Yeah.
or mean, but you got to create it. And I don't know how you
Yeah.
create it without the ego.
Yeah. Is perception reality?
It's best we got.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's one of my favorite films ever. You got to see it. Uso Justo
Ooh.
by Coleman Miller. It's a fake experimental film. He said, my favorite answer, he says, is perception reality? He says, that's all you got.
Yeah, who the fuck knows if it's reality, but it's what we have.
Well, it's also Lily Tomlin. Reality is just a collective hunch.
There was you can put more or less value into this, but I'm reminded how there were these tests done where they would scan the brain as people were listening to others talk, and
Yeah.
they would do this for a series of kind of inputs, looking at stuff, listening to somebody talk, and what they would find is that the part of your brain that activates when you're listening was just as active as the part of your brain that imagines things.
Yeah.
And you found this in your own life. Somebody can trail off a sentence and you can finish it, which means that you have perceived a sentence that never happened.
Yeah.
And how much of seeing and hearing is, in fact, a combination of memory, imagination, mistake, and sensory input.
Totally. I told my friend once, I says, he spoke in a half sentence.
Yeah.
And I says, hey, dude, America, we speak in half sentences. He goes, deal with it. Which was great because we do. And, partners are always finishing sentences. And hey, I wasn't going to say that, but we anticipate, it's almost like whatever they call that thing on cell phones that finish your word.
Predictive text. Yeah.
What's it called?
Predictive text.
That's what you're talking about. Predictive text.
Yeah.
Predictive text.
I'm okay with it if a human does it to me. I don't like a machine doing it to me.
McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying artists dream awake. Everybody creates these scenarios in the middle of the night and have this creative power going. But artists, not to sound elitist, but artists also do that while they're awake. They dream awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
I have been told by a number of people that my work evokes a dreamlike quality. I don't dream. This is really the best. I dream rarely. I compare notes with other folks. I dream rarely, but I do think that my experience of being alive is somewhat abstracted from the material most of the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not much of a dreamer, but I've been called a dream-like artist. So I don't really know what to make of that.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
That's a great question. I think that there are some big picture impossible things that I feel like are fundamental to who I am. Yet when I go through my own struggles of happiness or meaning or struggling to feel joy or optimism, it usually comes from the most literal part of my brain, the part of my brain that is empirical, that has no access to impossible things. So I would say that, I mean, I recently got married in September, and even that act, for me, there was a importance to having everyone in the same backyard who I loved.
Yeah.
And that moment just existing.
Yeah.
Is that Now, I would call that a belief in an impossible thing in the sense that it wasn't, there was no material objective. There was nothing I wanted to see happen, but that moment needed to exist in my life somewhere between birth and death, and it would make my life richer. That is the way in which I believe in impossible things.
Yeah, that was beautiful example because it's just like, hey, backyard, people I love, boom. What a way to celebrate. Yeah, Sunra said the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
That's beautiful. I love that.
That is so beautiful. Okay, so Jack, you've done this for years, your creativeness. Tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
I think the element that has stayed the same is absolutely that sense that the characters and their wills come before the narrative structure in my work.
Yeah.
That I am in some ways a curator of different lenses, perspectives, ideologies, motivations, fears, and it's the kind of chemistry of putting those things together.
Yeah.
I would say what has changed the most in my work is I used to be an artist who thought that my job was to control physical reality. And I think that I now see my role as an artist as to respond to, react, and curate physical reality.
Yeah. That's good. Let's go back to that first thing, the sameness though. Where'd you get that sense that the characters will comes before the narrative by other playwrights and filmmakers or authors, or what's the root of that? The way your parents raised you?
Yeah. I would say on an intuitive level, it comes from, maybe it was being the child of divorce and trying to mediate between my parents and seeing both sides and understanding how they both felt. Maybe it was, my exposure to Shakespeare when I was very young, where even though Shakespeare has villains, he has a very strong sense of why they do what they do.
Yeah.
The language, though, came from Dostoevsky, I would say. I didn't get the language.
Oh, really?
The words I'm using to describe that instinct is largely based around Bakunin's writings, who was, a vicious anti-Semite, but Bakunin's writings on Dostoevsky is where I got.
How do you spell that guy's name?
Bakunin. Bakunin.
His writings on the okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's good. You besides curating all that, you curate your roots well. But I got to tell you this, I hate to say this, but someone once told me, what age were you when your parents divorced?
I would say it's kind of a smear of 9 to 13.
Yeah. They say if your parents divorce before you're 17, you're fucked. Which is it's a horrible thing to say to people, but it is. That pattern is interesting because probably we could talk about that for 90 minutes. Just what if they would have waited till you were 18?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I might be the exception because I call my parents the textbook of bad marriage, good divorce. I give them infinite credit for not dragging my sister and I through a vicious divorce, but that marriage was rough.
Wow. See, yeah.
So that's really coming out.
They had 6 kids together, or your dad had?
My dad had 6 kids. Me and my So my mother and him, that was his second marriage. There are 2 of us full siblings.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
Yeah.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Thinking of a couple. trying to pick which weakness to highlight here.
Yeah.
I would say, I guess one thing I would say is that I am, by my nature, intensely shy.
Yeah.
And I've realized that if I embrace that shyness, it gives me a lot of time to watch the world and be creative, kind of feeling outside of it, feeling a little alienated from it. So then I can store up all of my energy to then be social in order to create the work, to promote the work, to work in the world. But an intense shyness and a desire to not be seen is kind of in my spinal cord.
Really well articulated. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
I guess I should say that generally the way I look at the subject is that a lot of it is a lot of the binary differences are self-imposed and not organic. They come from society rather than self. But given that we do live in a society, the biggest difference that I see in my life is a kind of, how do you put this? Almost every woman who I've known well enough to feel like I could describe something about their personality in my actual life has had a similar quality of maybe seeing so much that it causes them pain. I think that most of the men that I know can compartmentalize and can have blind spots and don't try to get rid of those blind spots, and they can get obsessed. Whereas most women I know see everything in a way that is much harder. I often say to my wife that she would be a lot happier if she could just see a little less.
Yeah. That's there's a cliche that go, women know, men suppose. that really helps that aphorism with truthness. So there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Jack, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate.
Yeah.
James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Yeah.
And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So any thoughts on this line? You create what you resist. One creates what one resists.
Well, funny, just to kind of continue on a lot of the themes we've talked about in my own work, I would say that the works that I do that I'm most excited about shove people together, force them into the same space, and force these conflicts or differing needs out of them.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I am in love with the flow and pattern teamingness of life lived socially, but that's something that I actually have a very low tolerance for myself. And it's almost as though it's my dabbling and being a part of a community when actually what I want is to be outside of or apart from a community. Yet I write with an intensity of both the joys and the challenges that come of being completely immersed, swallowed by a group.
Yeah. It's a good example. Thank you. How do you find peace of mind?
I would say reading dense books and watching slow movies, things outside of myself slow me down.
Dense books and slow movies. That is good. Here's 5 Alan Watts questions off the top of your head. One, who started it all?
Ooh, no one.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
With those we love.
Who's cleaning it up?
If the answer isn't you, don't give an answer.
Oh my God, that is the best answer I've ever had. If the answer isn't you, yeah. Okay. I actually had someone recently say my maid. I was like, oh my God.
Oh
But you
God.
know, how could you make a judgment? You're like, oh, you have a maid? It's like, no, I mean, they were answering the question. What can you say? Fifth Alan Watts question. Is it serious?
No.
Yeah. Okay, a few more and we're out of here, Jack. This has really been fun. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure so far.
Yeah. When I asked my friend, can satire be destructive? He wrote Comedy with Robin Williams. He says, that's the job of satire. Now, if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us,
No.
that we would, some people think death is destructive, but Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
I mean, I think satire's hope is to show every face, including your own, and to insist on culpability.
Yeah.
I think most satire is bad satire, and it simply aims to destroy. But good satire aims to burn down the self so that you can actually create something better in its place.
That is great, Bert. What's the function of laughter?
Not to cry.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's I'm stealing that from Abraham Lincoln, by the way. I want to be clear.
Oh, is that Abraham Lincoln? Yeah, Gurdjieff says the function of laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
I like that.
But there's another one. McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen. Behind every joke, there's a grievance. And I would even say, drop the word every. Behind jokes, there's a grievance. Any thoughts on that line?
I almost wanted you to say behind jokes, there's grief.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I've always really liked an old line from Al Franken who said, I think he coined the phrase "kidding on the square," where there is no joke that isn't also serious.
Oh, I've said that for years. People go, I was just kidding. I goes, there's no such thing as kidding.
Yeah.
You know, it's like such an easy out. I was just kidding.
Yeah.
But it's just a way to soften things, you know.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Man. Ooh, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready to say anything to my 12-year-old self. If I were to give him any advice, it would be to try to be a little less hard on myself. But honestly, I am who I am because of what I've been through. So I probably would just leave it alone.
That's good. In fact, you know, Dr. John, the great New Orleans rock star musician, I asked him all these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to that one, he goes, I won't go there. It was like it was almost like voodoo, you know, like no way.
I love that.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Under.
And why?
It's more convenient for me that way.
There you go. Well, the patent is 100 years old and it has it going over, and 90% of people say over. So I love it when someone says under and they have a reason. Because you don't have to have a reason. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Ooh, I'd rather be lonely than duped.
They want to scent the glue and the binding. What smell?
Dogwood trees.
Oh, wow. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, man. Can it be in storage, like in the basement of the Art Institute of Chicago or something like that? Stay in storage.
Sure. That's a good place. I like that.
Then what's it made of? Some kind of old wood. You know, maybe an elm or oak or something.
Well, I asked for 90 minutes. Do you have a few minutes to go over, or you got to get going?
Oh, I've got a few minutes.
Okay, because I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up earlier. We're doing this film on archiving, and it's like, just the storage in an art museum. It's like, I love the futurists. They said burn all art museums and libraries, and it was like, oh my God, we can't do that. And you already have an archive, I'm sure, of scripts or
Yeah.
film parts. Why do you think humans feel obliged to archive? What is this thing? Like, isn't the most important thing to live in the moment? Why would we want to, you know, feel like we're going to preserve something by keeping stuff, as opposed to, like, you can articulate these memories. Yeah, the memory of your marriage in the backyard is what's important. Do you have to have pictures and photos, or is your memory
Yeah.
more important? So what's your take on this? Why is it innate in humans to archive? What is this need or want to archive all about?
I do think that my instinct is that it's innate, and my instinct is that the cynical thing I could say would be it's a kind of useless fight against death.
Yeah.
It's kind of your arms are too short to box with God, but you try anyway.
Yeah.
But I do think that I do want to give a slightly more optimistic answer and say that our memory is so. I think we know that our memories are bad. I think we know that our memories are unreliable. And we have a desire on some basic level to carry with us what we've done and what we've seen. Because that's the closest thing we have, going back to that perception as reality, that's the closest thing we have to proof that we existed.
Yeah.
But I do think that the memory is, I think that in some ways we're admitting it without saying it, that our memories are insufficient, that memories are strange things. Maybe there's no such thing as memory.
Really a great point. I showed this weird film once at one of my series, and it got pick of the week in the LA Weekly, and the guy sat in about the second or third row, and every once in a while he'd pull the weekly's review out of his back pocket and start reading it, because he was like, what is this about again? Because he needed that. Like, he was like, it was, his memory was unreliable. Why did I come to this? Because I read this review. I mean, how else would he have known? It's not. So it was like, that always sticks in my head. Like, what is this again? What am I seeing?
I love that.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had and I never want. My first quibble would be that then I don't think of it as good.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I don't mean to be, above it all or anything like that, but when I walk through Beverly Hills or something like that, I often think to myself, is this really fucking it? Is this the pinnacle of Western civilization right here on this fucking block?
Yeah.
So whatever it is that Beverly Hills is selling, I don't want.
That's heavily, because the three answers I get the most are money, fame, and heroin. That says a lot right there.
No.
So if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I've got a weak stomach, so I'd probably puke.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I think that the return, and I think it's not how, the countervailing forces are there, but I think that there is a large contingency of folks who are trying to return art making to a place of community, tradition, culture, and self-expression, and away from industry.
Yeah. It's good. High hopes there, dude. I love to hear that. How has being a playwright and a filmmaker shaped your behavior?
You know, in some ways, I think that my behavior is why I ended up in those fields. But I would say that what became exacerbated once I started working as a playwright and filmmaker primarily is the biggest change in my behavior, I think, is that I became somebody who was very articulate and a very empathetic communicator because I had to be.
Yeah. It's really good. There's a what do you call those video game maker? Huge. I think his name's David O'Brien or something. He made this video game called Mountain. It's just a mountain, whatever. He's like this huge video guy, and he gave a lecture once, and he said, "Fuck storytelling. It's all about empathy." That just sticks out with me when people use that word empathy almost over storytelling.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a lot going on there. I mean, there's crossover.
Absolutely. And, I think, storytelling without empathy is pretty monstrous stuff. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
But I love what Lucretia Martel once said. I saw her at UCLA, and she said, I think of my characters as little monsters who just want terribly.
Yeah. They want
terribly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can't empathize with that, I mean, what can you empathize with?
She's not saying what they want. They just want.
They just want. They've got this gaping want. Yeah.
Yeah. What's one question that remains unresolved for you?
I would say that I'm working on, and it's important, how to feel some level of comfort with yourself.
Yeah. It's good. 2 more, we're out of here. Right. Thornton Wilder, there's a great playwright for you. Thornton Wilder in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Mm. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Oh, man. I think I love that. I love that quote. For me, at least, I'll say this. One part of being an artist is I also have something in the corner of my eye that I know is there, but I can't look at and I can't see.
Yeah.
And I think that to claim to know the answer to your question would be the height of arrogance.
Yeah.
And I think that I have some suspicions about what the answer might be. I have some suspicions about what I'm driving towards, but I think it's actually better that I don't look.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an amazing answer, because it's really, I'm sort of after that, because, what's it really all about for you? And then people think they know. Yeah. And I've just said this quote where even if you know, you keep it to yourself. They agree with the quote. So the way I set up questions with quotes is sort of backwards, because I'm pushing a certain direction.
You're subverting the question to some degree.
Say it again.
I feel like you're subverting the question in an interesting way. You're building a contradiction bomb into the heart of it.
I'm subverting the question, exactly, because it's like, it's not, the answers aren't important. The questions are important. And what we're trying to do is a new, but set up in the format of I ask a question, then you answer it. I ask a question. And, we try to have a conversation and dialogue, but it is sort of funny because people, I like when people go, well, I can't tell you the answer to that one because I know it, but I won't tell you. To people, when they answer that way, I'm like, yes, This is the most important because they think no, actually Rebecca Solnit said it best. Just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That's because it's a setup, and
Yeah.
it's anyways. I'll send you my book. If you read the intro, it sort of covers this whole thing about what an interview is, or
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, Jack, what gives you the most optimism?
Ooh, what gives me the most optimism? I'm a fairly optimistic person, but it's an optimism fueled by cynicism, if that makes any sense, in the sense that I don't have a lot of hope for our institutions. I don't have a lot of hope for our national identity. But I do think that once we kind of let go of these things that we're trying to maintain, there is an instinct in most individual people to create rather than to destroy.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good because the first question is I got it from Wilhelm Reich. What is the best thing for a human being? He says, another human being.
Yeah.
In fact, we didn't even get into the freedom. We got to get into that. But let me finish this sort of outro and we'll go back and cover one more thing. And then the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? They asked Groucho Marx that at the end of his life, and he says, other people. So it's, this, what's important to me is spending this time with another person. That's what we just did for 90 minutes. I mean, that's what's important, just because I could tell when we talked on the Venice Boardwalk. But I forgot to get into that sense of freedom because there's one question I didn't ask that brings that up. And it's Utah Phillips said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's the roots of the word anarchy, means giving oneself one's own laws.
Yeah.
A state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. What does freedom mean to you now? You said that's the best thing for a human being, a sense of freedom. What does freedom mean to you?
I think that Utah Phillips comes pretty damn close to my feelings. I mean, I have come to grips with the fact that I am some kind of anarchist in my, an anarchist syndicalist, not an anarchist libertarian. But I think that, I would say that I do need to feel control over my time.
Yeah.
And that's deeply important, a sense that I have control over my time. What's ironic is that total control over my time is a form of despair.
Yeah.
So it needs to be somehow, that idea that it needs to be contradicted or counteracted.
Yeah.
So ironically, freedom is some sort of sense that I have control over myself and I have chosen to use that control over my time and over myself to be dutiful to somebody that somebody or something that I've chosen to be dutiful towards.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of this flyer. When I worked for George Carlin, we got a flyer in the mail and it says, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. And it's like, like going to a great play or a movie, when you lose all sense of time, that's when that's succeeded. Like Louis Buñuel said, you come out of a movie and go, wasn't the cinematography great? That means the filmmaker failed. So it's like you want to lose this sense of time. Like, how can we? Chris Marker covers it a lot too, about why are we so ruled by time?
Yes.
What a fucking bullshit thing we've invented.
I'm reminded, I know we gotta go, but I'm reminded of an anecdote I once read. I started dating my wife years ago, and her family's Italian, and my family originally came from Germany. And there's an old anecdote that said a German and Italian were supposed to get lunch, the German showed up at 12:30 lunchtime. The Italian showed up at 2. The German says, "Why didn't you show up at 12:30? 12:30 is lunchtime." And the Italian said, "I showed up when I'm hungry. When I'm hungry is lunchtime."
There you go. See, beautiful. Anyways, Jack, I want to hit the end broadcast button, but I hope we can keep talking forever and ever. But I do have, can we hit it? And then I want to talk to you for a few seconds about the film. Do you have it? Okay. So I'll give you the official ending. Thank you, Jack. This has been truly enlightening, and I'm being sincere.
Thank you.
And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
I feel you.
Okay, hang in there. Here we go. Boom.